how great's this? My dad's my community group guy, and we're just kind of doing ministry together. And it was probably the weirdest year of ministry life. Like my father's behavior was weird. I don't know what was happening. And I get a call from my then associate pastor, and he says, "Hey, Bryan, we can't find your dad." I'm wondering what's going on with my father. And the man he was supposed to go over and see had a history of addiction.
Okay.
And he called me, and we were talking. He said, "Bryan, I think your dad's an addict."
Hey, my name is Steve Hinton, and I serve as a pastor and author.
And I'm your co-host, Matthias. I serve as a personal trainer and a volunteer at my local church.
We want to welcome you to The Man Identity, a podcast that is dedicated to calling up young men into purposeful manhood, which is ultimately found in Jesus Christ and being made in the image of God.
In a culture that is often deliberately set against young men, we're here to intentionally build hope, clarity, and strength into the hearts of these men who are searching for purpose. Together, we will face tough issues head on, throw down some weekly challenges, and have some fun along the way.
Because solid manhood is not automatic, but rather it's a choice. We're here to walk alongside you and encourage you to live out your authentic identity in being made in the image of God for a purpose larger than you have ever imagined.
So join us now for another episode of The Man Identity.
You know, Matthias, this may be a really important interview for a lot of guys, and not because it's really exciting, although it is, not because it's got a lot of good content, although it does, but it's kind of going to be a challenging type of episode today, talking about being a teachable man. Now, our purpose and my heart desire with the Man Identity is that we would be able to look at a lot of men in our culture here in America and England in the West who have just been bombarded over the past several decades with negative messages and pushed down, and they're trying to find their identity. They're trying to find purpose, and we want to encourage that. But in the growth process of being the man that God created us to be, finding our identity in Christ, we also need to have some tough lessons, and we need to man up to those lessons. And today we're kind of talking about that, the idea of being teachable, being a teachable man. Now, I came across this idea last month. I was up in Dallas at a men's discipleship conference. And the first session that I went to, I was by myself, so I just kind of sat on the back row by myself. And Dr. Bryan got up to speak, and he is a church planter. He is a pastor. He works with apologetics, which is giving evidences for Christianity, a biblical worldview. Really smart guy. But he delivered a series of points along this idea of being a teachable man. And the reality is that we have a lot of guys in our world today who are not teachable. And I have to listen to that. And I have to ask myself, okay, I'm working with guys, or do they have a teachable spirit? But then also kind of, again, holding the mirror up to my own face and saying, am I teachable? So I'm excited for this conversation we're going to have today, because I think it's so needed. On one hand, we need to encourage men and say, stand up, you can do this. God made you, you got purpose. But on the other hand, we live in such an entitlement society today, where we expect everything to be handed to us, and we're frustrated if we don't get things immediately. And we need to really hear the truth of this discussion of we've got to have a teachable spirit. We have to be teachable men to become the men that God created us to be.
Yeah, man, this is such a humbling interview for me. I think a lot, especially if people are like me, I think most people would say, yeah, I've got a teachable spirit. I could be taught. I'm open to, but I think when the moment comes down to it, that being taught doesn't come in the way you think, and you realize you're not a very teachable person. I think it takes a lot of experiences in life to kind of come to that realization. That's especially been my experience. So this interview with Bryan, oh man, it was humbling, but very edifying at the same time, in kind of just speaking to what I'm going through personally in my life.
Okay.
So I definitely know the viewer. Please stick around, because it's a very important interview to listen to, very eye opening and very informative. It makes you want to just call him directly and ask him to be your mentor. That's what I was after this, because that's one of the points he touches on. But Yeah, I just wanted to reach out to him after and be like, hey, you gotta meet with me once a week. It was that impactful for me.
Well, on that particular note, it was interesting to hear him say this when he began kind of launching his direction, his dominant thought, where he was going. He referenced something that had been said to him before by one of his mentors, that if you're working with a man who is not teachable, you need to drop them. You just need to drop them immediately. And it's one thing, and I'm not saying this to you in particular, I'm saying this to all of us. It's one thing to find a mentor. It's one thing to read the Bible. It's one thing to say, hey, I want to be taught. But when the word of God or the mentor, the older man or whoever begins to rebuke us in a loving way or whatever, that's where the rubber meets the road. Do we really have, are we just saying it, or do we really, at our deepest heart level, are we ready to be a teachable man?
Yeah, I think that's the right way to put it, because you might think, like I was saying earlier, you might think you're teachable, but when you're met with that criticism, that constructive criticism or that rebuke, do you take it or do you reject it because of your pride or because of insecurity? Whatever it is, how do you handle that? And I think that's when you really learn, am I teachable or am I not? So, or do I have a teachable spirit or do I not? So I think that, like, that's perfectly how you said it. That's perfect how you said it. That's when the rubber meets the road right there.
To set things up for the listener, one of the things that Bryan does, he goes to the Old Testament book of 1 Kings. He looks at one of the sons of King David who assumed he was going to be king and set himself up to be king. And Bryan kind of walked through that passages and gave us the illustration of what a teachable man is not. And so that's kind of the platform that he has to get us going in this direction. So let's roll the discussion.
All right, let's get into it.
Bryan, thank you so much for connecting with me today. I've actually been looking forward to this. The reason is because what I'm asking you to talk about today is kind of a tough issue. Now, here's the connection. When you look at the purpose of the man identity, we exist to just encourage young men. I mean, so much of our culture today is just dead set on destroying the family, destroying men, destroying young men. And there are so many young men today that don't have a purpose. They're clueless, they're powerless, they feel powerless, and they need to be lifted up. We need to be able to tell these young men, hey, you can do this. Find your identity in God, be the man that God created you to be. So we want to encourage them. But at the same time, there's this balance between, man, you can do this. I believe in you. And then on the other hand, there's this, okay, guy, be a man, get up, do this. And we're talking about being a teachable man. And, as I said in the introduction, I had the opportunity to sit on the back row for a conference last month where you were speaking, and I'm very gracious. We don't even really know each other yet, but you agreed to get online with me and do that. But we're talking about being a teachable man. And Bryan, my assumption is you weren't just sitting around at a cabin thinking, what am I going to talk about? Yeah, what about this? There's probably some kind of backstory to all this. And I don't know how much of that has to do with you being a pastor for a number of years, you being an educator, you being an apologist, in your own personal story, because we all have different personal stories. What is some of the background, that the foundation that builds this idea of we have to be teachable men, and older men, we want to look for teachable men? What's behind this?
Yeah. Well, probably a few things. So first, great to be with you, Stephen. I think, you were talking about encouraging men and lifting them up. And my immediate thought was, that's what we have to do, provided they're liftable.
Okay.
And
And
I think that's the thing that in 25 years of working with men that I've seen, is that I have seen a lot of guys who need to be lifted, who have some guys who will pour into them. And we definitely need more guys who will pour in, but they are not liftable. And that is kind of I think it's kind of the one thing. When I was teaching in the message you heard, and we'll talk some about that text, I shared that story from the Karate Kid, where Mr. Miyagi sits and says to Daniel LaRusso, the man who catch fly with chopstick can do anything, and then Daniel catches fly.
So Bryan, is this the original Karate Kid from the
No,
80s?
it's the original. Don't,
There you are. There you are.
If you're going to do anything, you can go Cobra Kai. That's fine. Go Cobra Kai, but don't.
The original from the 80s. Go ahead.
Let's stay with that. So, this is the thing, is that what I've learned over 25 years of pastoral ministry, through 25 years of discipling men, teaching, preaching, is that you can only take somebody as far as they want to go. And oftentimes you can also, and nobody wants to say it, but you can waste your time. And you waste your time because we have limited time. It's not something that we have an abundance of. And so we have to adjudicate how we handle it. And if you're going to pour into somebody, you want to make sure they're teachable. The hard part is, I'm not convinced. I'm open to it, but I'm not convinced we can make people teachable. I've found over the years that that's a kind of horse only God breaks. And so a part of my story in my own life, that wasn't like, it wasn't what set the agenda for it. It actually came along in the middle of my ministry. So here's what happened. I was raised in a home where my parents came to Christ when I was 7. I was an only child, upstate New York, small town. And my parents had me super young. I was at my mom's high school graduation, like it was like a Jack and Diane kind of story, John Cougar Mellencamp song, They got married and they came to Christ. I'm 7 years old. At some of the listeners may have heard of a guy. If they haven't, look him up. He was a stud. His name was Bill Glass. Bill Glass was one time he had the largest prison ministry in America. He was an old linebacker with the Cleveland Browns. And he came and did a citywide crusade in a small town in upstate New York that the stadium was for the Oneonta Yankees, single A team, baseball team for the New York Yankees. And my parents went forward to accept Christ. When they did, the people around them thought they were going forward to be counselors for people coming to faith, because they were involved in a gospel teaching church, but they actually came in to give their life to Christ. And they were only in their late 20s at the time. And so moving forward, my father got radical for Christ, and he began a little singing ministry around upstate New York, had a gorgeous voice. My mom would run the sound. I'd sell the tapes as an only child. And it was like the three amigos out there in these little towns in upstate New York doing ministry. And I'm like, 10 years old at the time. And fast forward, I had an idyllic childhood. My dad pivoted in his career, went back to Bible college. He graduated from Bible college the same year I graduated high school. I had great friends when I got married at the end of college. I'd been in best man in 5 weddings before my own. And my own wedding comes along, and I decided, man, I got all these buddies, but I want the best man to be the best man.
Wow.
And that was my dad. Wow. My dad was my hero. He was a stud. I thought of my dad like David, a man after God's own heart. And I said, that's the dude I want to be like. So I go into ministry. I end up going to seminary, and through seminary, finished seminary. My dad is in ministry. I'm in ministry. I mean, in some ways, I felt like I'm living the dream in a way. I get to talk to my dad about life and ministry and all these kinds of amazing things. Well, I moved to Utah, planted a church, and let's see, it was March of 2010. I had, by a backstory, about a year earlier, my parents had moved in 2007 out to be in Utah near us.
Okay.
And he had pastored a large church in the Midwest, but stuff was just, I didn't even know what was going on. But, church life's hard sometimes. Stuff happens, and you're like, okay, he's having some difficulties, and they pivoted. And okay, they came out to be near us. We got the grandkids, and I ended up hiring my dad on our church plant. We're like 3 or 4 years old, and I hire my dad, and he comes on staff. And I thought, how great's this? My dad's my community group guy, and we're just kind of doing ministry together. And it was probably the weirdest year of ministry life. Like my father's behavior was weird. I don't know what was happening. So March of 2010 rolls around. I am down in Texas speaking at a conference. On my way back, we stopped in Colorado Springs to stay at a place with our kids. And my wife goes into a Walmart to get luncheon meat and stuff for the kids to make sandwiches, picnic lunch. And I'm in the car with them, and I get a call from my then associate pastor, and he says, "Hey, Bryan, we can't find your dad." And I said, what are you talking about? You can't find my father. He goes, well, He was on his way over to a guy in the church's home, and he began to speak incoherently, and he never showed up. And we don't know where he is. And I said, oh, wow, okay. So long and the short is I was able to get my father on the phone. And as he answered the phone, he was blitz drunk in the middle of a field somewhere.
Wow.
I had the police on another phone, local police. And so I got these two phones. The police are coaching me, hey, get him to walk to a sign, read you the sign, sit down on a curb so we can know where he is to go pick him up. Tell him to leave his keys in the car. So I did. He did. He reads the sign. They go pick him up. Amazingly, they didn't cite him. But what's going on with my father? And the man he was supposed to go over and see had a history of addiction.
Okay.
And he called me and we were talking, and he said, Bryan, I think your dad's an addict. And I said, what? And he said, I think he is. And he began an explanation, and he said, just listen to what I have to say. And he started bulleting points of behavior and a host of things. And he was right about it. And it was almost like a light came on, and I started to see loose ends get tied together. And I said, would you be
Connecting
willing
the dots?
Yeah. I said, would you be willing to go confront my dad and just talk to him to see if he'll acknowledge if this is in fact the case? And so he did. And my father did. And my father became suicidal. When I drove back into town from Colorado Springs, I drove straight to the hospital, to the psych ward, to see the guy who was my hero, who now was showing me crafts that he had painted in the psych ward. And I thought, what has happened to him? And so what came to light was this, that for 12 years up until that point, so that means looking back now like 27 years ago, but 12 years up to that point, my father had hidden a prescription pain pill addiction from my mother, from our family. And there was a host of behavior that I found out about that had happened over a decade, little over a decade. And that led to the unraveling of our family. That led to my father committing adultery. That led to my parents divorcing. That led to my mother coming to live with us. That led to him at a time of quite frankly not being very sane in steeped in addiction. It led to him, after all this came to light, threatening me in different ways, and even putting me in some very difficult positions. He had committed theft and a host of things. It was, all hell broke loose. So I sat with him over a lunch about 2 years into all this addiction coming to light.
2 years after you found him in the hospital in the psych ward.
Yeah, 2 years after. And my dad my dad ended up, I had to put my dad at the Salt Lake Gospel Rescue Mission as a homeless man. He lived as a homeless man for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
He was sleeping in his car. It became like a junkie. And it was a disaster. And we sat at a table, and it was a key moment I'll never forget. He said, Bryan, I took the first pill because I had back surgeries and I had back pain. He said, and when I took it, it made me feel like Superman. It had all my insecurities go away.
Wow. Okay.
It caused something in me. And he said, but here's what I can't figure out. And I said, what's that, Dad? And he said, why did I take the second pill? After I knew that's what it made me feel like, why did I keep going? And when he shared that, I thought, I think I know. And I think that's a pretty long, complicated story. And that's the way it is for most men. Most men, guys that would listen to this podcast, guys you and I minister to, Steve, guys that others listening to this minister to, guys living in real life, they got baggage, they got stuff in their bags. All of us do. It's all there.
There's
we all
always
have our own stories.
Yeah.
Right? All got our own stories. And so, but one of the things I realized about my dad is my dad had largely avoided contexts where there was deep, intense, vulnerable accountability, and where there was a sense of what I would call being the kind of person who is dispositionally teachable. Now, oftentimes people say, well, that's because he was arrogant. And I'd pause and I'd say, I'm not sure that's what I would say, actually.
I would think there's a brokenness underneath that.
I think the root of here, and this is an important piece that I think I need to make in this. I'd love your thoughts, Steve, with this, but I think the grounding of a lack of teachability, we often think is what we identify as pride. But I actually think pride has kind of I look at pride like a mountain with two slopes. And on the one side is kind of the low-hanging fruit of arrogance that everybody identifies as pride. On the other side is insecurity and self-pity.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think that oftentimes what makes men unteachable is their life in insecurity. And the moment you bring something to bear that they don't know, they feel threatened by it, and they don't want to have to say, like, I just don't know. Or I was wrong, or I'm sorry, and my dad could say I'm sorry. My dad could say he was wrong. But there were insecurities there, I think, that were long held that just didn't that allowed him to take shortcuts in life. And if you want to take shortcuts in life, chances are you're going to struggle to be a teachable man. A teachable man's willing to walk the hard road, long road. Yeah. So that coupled with the discipleship components that I had observed over years, it had just kind of led me to a place of reflecting as a pastor on what is it that seems to me to be that thing that holds men back. And I want to make one other comment about that. And that's because I've also observed something, and it came to me about a decade ago. I used to equate humility and teachability, and I don't do it anymore.
Okay.
And the reason I don't do it anymore is because I've seen people who, out of deference, will, in respect, will say, yeah, you're right. Yeah. And they'll agree. But they're recalcitrant and stubborn internally, and they will not move off a dime. And so humility becomes a veneer by which teachability is actually kept at bay. And I've watched that with guys. So I just think that teachability is kind of the trigger point of discipleship, and all the ducks can be in a row, but they'll never get knocked over, ever, if you can't be teachable.
Wow. Bryan, I think you're spot on so many things. And we here at the Man Identity on the podcast, we're trying to define how long we want our episodes to be. And most of our episodes have been well over an hour and a half. And I'm thinking, my goodness, we could probably go 3 here today. I mean, number one, it would be interesting to hear how you work through this in your own heart, because a lot of young guys are dealing with that. You know, they may not have a dad in their life, or they may have a father that has wounded them, and how have they walked through that? How have they forgiven their father? Have they forgiven their father? What does that mean? But your observation as well, let me do it this way. I'm thinking of another illustration. Let's say we got a guy who's always angry, and we might say he's got an anger problem. We need to send him to an anger management program, and we do. And the anger's there, but that's not the real issue. Something's underneath the issue. Maybe it's fear. Fear because his father walked out, or fear that his father called him a pansy, or beat the snot out of him, or whatever. So there's this little boy who's afraid. And, well, how do I deal with that? Well, I'm going to be tough. Well, then that tough leads to anger and rage. So you're right. There's always something underneath that we have to get to, that we have to attack. And I think that's incredibly fascinating that you're connecting the dots. Let me put it this way. There are all kinds of jokes about Gen Z. Gen Z guys, hey, they only want to work 30 hours a week instead of 40,
right.
And I think some of those things are right. I was born in '69, so I'm kind of in my own generation. I'm not a boomer, but I'm not an Xer. I'm in my own generation.
You're like a Gen Boomer.
Yeah, that's right. So part of this is true, but you go back and you look at what is the root of some of these issues, and a lot of it is they didn't have a godly man in their life teaching them, hey, you need to get up and finish your job. Hey, you need to do this. So,
brother, let me tell you something. This is so years ago. I learned this from a guy in the Dallas area. So I can't take credit for it, but the number of times over the last 2 decades I've used this in counseling and talking with men is legion. So you hit on something so important. And I think we have to, as men, talk about what it is that's beneath the surface. And here's the issue. You can have, every man has his own narrative. So the uniqueness of the nature of the problems, challenges, difficulties, strains, contentions, discombobulations, whatever you want to say about a human life as a man, are as myriad as men. So they're all over the place. But here's what sits below anger. Every man, and I love this metaphor, every man has within him, metaphorically, an emotional cup.
Okay.
In that cup, when circumstances of negativity, hardship, and difficulty happen, sometimes even if they're self-imposed by our sin or they're other imposed by the sin of others against us, there is always, and I do believe this, there's always one first thing that goes in the cup. And the first thing that goes in the cup is hurt. No man wants to call it that, but it's hurt. And this is true from my father is an addict and hurt me. It's true if somebody says my dad abused me. It's true if I'm driving down the road and somebody cuts me off on the highway. Now, no guy says, oh, I was so hurt that guy cut me off on the highway. It just broke my heart. No, but here's what he does. He gives him the finger. He gets angry. He yells. He gets frustrated. So here's what you have. Undealt with hurt is layered by anger. Calcified anger is layered by bitterness and resentment. Undealt with bitterness and resentment leads to outbursts of rage. To cope with those things, you become cynical. And if you can't cope with the cynicism you're dealing with, you give into addiction. And there's a movement upward that with the cup that's full. Fear plays into it, but all these negative things come on it. But what we find in negative emotionality with men is that it's largely dealing with undealt with hurt. So what that means is that a man has to keep short accounts with himself.
Okay.
He has to be able to dump out hurt at the level of emotional pain. And then he's going to have a negative stuff that happens. It's going to hurt again. It's going to be recycled. My dad and I have a relationship today. I love him. We communicate love back and forth. We text multiple times a week. There's a story there. There's a history there. There are things that can still be said that remind me of past things. And I got to dump it out again. And I got to dump it out again. And I got to dump it out again. So one of the things about a teachable man is he's a steward of his own emotional cup because he recognizes that when it fills up, you don't have the categories to hear anymore, man.
You got to dump the glass out.
Yeah, you got to dump it out.
If you don't, it's going to spill out on others. And it's not going to allow God to put anything in as well. And I think a lot of that would come back to much of what you do, just men's discipleship, and the reality that, you know, being on Facebook, being on Zoom, as good as those conversations can be, we've got to be in situations where we're eyeball to eyeball with another man to get all that out. To get all that out.
And somebody that can ask the hard questions and you'll listen.
Yeah.
You'll take it in. You'll put yourself in a relationship. You know, this is part of it. It goes with just the way knowledge works, but wrongly, American men are taught to think for themselves. It's a mythology. Nobody thinks for themselves. Anybody who says, I think for myself, thinks that way because somebody told them to think that way. So you don't think for yourself. The issue is, do you curate the influences that are helping you think rightly? That's the question.
I like that.
That's the question.
I like that. Wow. So there's so much to talk about, but what we want to do is what I would like to do. And if nothing else, this will give men a starting goal or a roadmap. I still believe that a real man will learn how to read a map. That's what I still
should. You should.
There's another episode on that. A real man can read a map.
A real man says no to Siri. Go ahead.
Yeah. But can you give us a roadmap? And I liked. It's funny because I had thought about when I heard you speak last month. I had thought about some of these things with another son of King David, and that was Absalom. But can you walk us through what you presented to that auditorium of men last month in Dallas from 1 Kings chapter 3, I believe, and this some principles that we can pull out from a life of a man who was not teachable.
I love it. Yeah, and it's 1 Kings 1. But let me walk you through it. So it's just the first 10 verses. It's really verses 5 through 10. But it's about a lesser known son. And so just to set the table, David had a number of kids. David's personal life was an abject disaster. And so he's a man for God's own heart in the kingship. He's pursuing the Lord. He's a man of deep abiding fellowship with the Lord. But we're not being honest with history if we don't look and say David struggled as a family man. And how do we know that? Well, you look at his kids, and I understand when I say this, by the way, there's no guarantees with your children. Lots of faithful parents have kids that don't.
Right.
So there's none of that going on here. Here's the point, though. David's life, because of his personal decisions, even sexually, kind of unravel in some ways. And so he has a son named Amnon who rapes Amnon rapes his sister, David's daughter, Tamar. David is largely inactive in response to that. And so
And how much of that, Bryan, do you think it's because that he's dealing with his own sin? Because this is right after he committed adultery with Bathsheba.
No doubt. I mean, David, yes. Yeah, David's is what Dallas Willard, he's in what calls the gospel of sin management.
Okay.
He's trying to figure out how to manage his own sin.
Yeah. What do I do with this? Yeah.
Right. So as a result, Absalom steps in, and Absalom says it's unjust that this happened. He's angry about it. And he ends up, because David doesn't do anything, Absalom lays hold of the bull by the horns and literally kills his brother. And Absalom then loses respect for his father. Insurrection happens. And some of the people listening to this podcast might be familiar that Absalom becomes one who is really the greatest challenger to the throne of David through David's kingship. So Absalom ends up dead. David retains his kingship. So David has 2 dead sons, a daughter that's raped, and there was another son named Kiliab or Daniel. We don't know for sure, but there's 2 different names given to him. And apparently he died. We don't know anything about him, but he was older, right, than Adonijah. But Adonijah is the next heir apparent. And when we come on the scene in 1 Kings chapter 1, David is dying. Now, that's important to note, and I'll read you a portion of this, just leads into the text. But 1 Kings 1, verse 1 through 4, read this way. Now King David was old and advanced in years, and although they covered him with clothes, he could not get warm. Therefore a servant said to him, let a young woman be sought for my lord the king, and let her wait on the king and be in his service. Let her lie in your arms, that my lord the king may be warm. So they sought for a beautiful young woman throughout all the territory of Israel, and found Abishag the Shunammite and brought her to the king. The young woman was very beautiful. She was of service to the king and attended to him, but the king knew her not. Now, a couple of features of the text that are significant. Why does it twice say she's beautiful? I made the joke when I was speaking that an ugly woman and a beautiful woman both have the same body temperature, so they'll both keep you warm.
Right.
Why does the text say she's beautiful? Why does it say, and he knew her not? What's that have to do with anything? Well, it has to do with a lot, because today we have medical equipment that will tell us, if you're winding down in your life, we'll give you palliative care and these kinds of things. In the ancient world, they don't have that. So what are they doing here? Well, they're actually testing to see if David has virility, sexual virility, and to know, is he nearing the end of his life? Because if he's nearing the end of his life, we got to figure out what the succession plan is. Now, the succession plan has kind of been already mapped out. We go back to 2 Samuel, and we know that it's going to be Solomon, but we have somebody who wants to step in, Adonijah, a son, since Solomon is younger. He wants to step in. He's the oldest now, the heir apparent on the exterior, outside of what we know about Solomon, what's been articulated prior in the text. Adonijah is the one who's going to wants to become king. So Adonijah sees that David lacks virility, and Adonijah is going to seize a moment. Now,
and Adonijah is the guy that we've got the spotlight on here that has not a teachable heart.
That's right. And so how do we know that? Here's the next 5 or 6 verses. We'll read all of them. I'll come back and we'll just kind of zip down through real fast, because what I want to share with you are just 5 quick observations about an untaught man. Now Adonijah, so this is verse 5, 1 Kings 1, verse 5. Now Adonijah, son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen, 50 men to run before him. His father had never at any time displeased him by asking, why have you done thus and so? He was also a very handsome man. He was born next after Absalom. He conferred with Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and with Abiathar the priest, and they followed Adonijah and helped him. But Zadok the priest, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and Nathan the prophet, Shimei and Ray, and David's mighty men were not with Adonijah. Adonijah sacrificed sheep, oxen, and fattened cattle by the serpent's stone, which is beside En Rogel. And he invited all his brothers, the king's sons, and all the royal officials of Judah. But he did not invite Nathan the prophet, or Benaiah, or the mighty men, or Solomon, his brother. And so what you see, the rest of the story, by the way, this goes forward, and Adonijah does not become king. Solomon becomes king. Adonijah ends up trying to even angle with Solomon. He tries to angle with Solomon to have Solomon give him as wife Abishag, the young, beautiful woman that laid down with his father.
Which would have been another claim to the throne.
Sure. I mean, this guy is a man who is about self-exaltation. That's what he's focused on. So we got 5 observations about an untaught man. Right when I started to read in verse 5, we read that he exalted himself. And so here's the first observation, is that an untaught man is prone to pride.
Okay.
So I shared a story when I was speaking in Dallas. And when I was when I finished Bible college, I won an award in Bible college.
I remember
Small Bible college, but I won the award for most likely to be on the radio preaching. And the irony is I'm on the radio every day in Utah, right? That's the irony. It's funny. But so he's like, okay, I win the award. So I go to Dallas Seminary. Dallas is like, at the time, Dallas was like, man, if you wanted to preach, like Dallas Seminary, that was where you went, you know? So I'm like, I'm going to Dallas Seminary. So I go down to Dallas Seminary. I'm cocksure. I'm 22 years old. I get in my classes, and I think it was in my second year, or maybe second semester of my first year. I'm going to take homiletics class, which is the science of preaching. And you're going to preach.
Basic preaching class.
Yeah, basic preaching. And usually what they do is they walk you through, they teach you how to preach, and then they'll lab a sermon or two, and you get up and you do some kind of modified short sermon in front of your classmates. And you get publicly critiqued. It's recorded. The prof goes through it with you and teaches you what you did right, what you did wrong, how you can improve all that stuff. So they got this classroom. In the back is a glass window where the prof is on the back side of that with recording equipment. And they got it set up almost like a little chapel, and you're up on an elevated stage and you're preaching to your classmates. So I'm preaching, and the text that I'm preaching, right, is Proverbs 11:1. This is my text. I'm going to read it for you.
Were you assigned this text, or did you pick it? Okay.
I'm assigned it. So I get assigned it. They want us to do a little like a little homily. It's like a 10-minute little sermonette.
Right.
Build it around this proverb. So here's my proverb. A false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. So, it's about integrity and business and money and how you handle yourself with commerce, but you're a man of integrity, right? So I'm loaded for bear. I'm get up. I'm like, I am going to blow these guys away. I'm going to win the preaching award here at Dallas Seminary, and they'll probably repent if lack of integrity in this class right now. So I get up and I start going, and I'm about 5 minutes into a 10-minute homily, and I never in my life, never before or since, have I experienced what I experienced in front of those men. My mind went so blank. Steve, I could not have told you my own name. I couldn't. And I remember I stopped and I stared, and for 45 seconds, I just stared at my classmates. And these guys stared at me, and I stared at them. And if you sit in front of an audience for 45 seconds in dead silence, it gets awkward, and people start feeling weird. And I had nothing. And I looked out at them, and finally I shrugged my shoulders. And I just like, I don't know. And I muddled through something in like about a minute and a half, and I sat down in shame. It was the only public sermon I ever preached in 4 years of full-time seminary at Dallas Seminary. And I thought, you're an idiot. That's what I thought. I'm just a complete fool. Now here's the catch. Here's the next verse after Proverbs 11:1. Proverbs 11:2 reads, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble is wisdom. There's rarely a time, sometimes in my own church because of familiarity, but if I'm out speaking somewhere, I almost never get up without thinking about that classroom experience, even though that was now, 28 years ago or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I hardly ever even, why? Because I learned the truth of Proverbs 15:33, which reads, the fear of the Lord is instruction and wisdom, and humility comes before honor. And I learned something valuable. And this is what I want men to grasp on this point about an untaught man is prone to pride. You have 2 choices in your life in any given situation. On the one fork is humility, and on the other fork is humiliation. On the fork of humility, you are the one calling the shots because you're the one who's choosing to humble yourself before the Lord. On the road to humiliation, you don't get to call the shots. I had pride, and I didn't get to say what it would look like for me to have my ego in check. Instead, God said, I'll get you up on a stage. I'll make you look like an idiot.
I'll
so
check
that
it.
you can learn something bigger in your life. Now, here's the hard part, Steve. You and I both know that an unteachable man doubles down on the road to humiliation. He'll walk it down. My dad got to where he was because he didn't take he hit the speed bumps and kept going.
Okay.
On the road to humiliation. So an untaught man has to be able to say, look, I suffered humiliation here. Can I pivot so that in the future I'm characterized by humility? I can't go back and undo this. I couldn't get back up on the stage in front of my friends. But man, I was teaching every week as a youth pastor. I started preaching in church. I had opportunity now to say, could I be a different kind of person? If I wasn't teachable, all that was in the offing for me down the line was just further humiliation. So that's the first thing. And I'm talking about prone to pride. He'll get on the road to destruction. But the text that I read, 1 Kings 1:5. Now Adonijah, son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, now watch it what he says, I will be king. I will be king. And he prepared for himself chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. Now here's an interesting thing. That same description about 50 men to run before him, 2 Samuel
Solomon did.
15:1. It's Absalom.
Yeah. Not Solomon, but Absalom. Yeah. The exact same
Absalom.
thing. Exactly. He didn't learn from his brother.
No. And so the second verse is going to be the same as the first, right? So the second piece is that an untaught man is stoked. That is, he gets amped, he gets inflamed, he gets his passions lit by self-seeking. What amps him up is when he gets built up. What amps him up is when when he feels like he's the bee's knees, right? And I see this again and again. A guy is out looking for his own, in marriage, it's like this. He's looking for that person that's going to elevate him rather than give him the opportunity for a life of a joyful pursuit and sacrificial service, which is what a real man does. Instead, he's the kind of man that is stoked by self-seeking. And that's what you find here. So, he ignores something like a text of scripture that comes to my mind here is 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 5-7, which interestingly is about, right before this is about eldership, about leadership in the church.
Okay.
And then you get verse 5, and it says, likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And that's a common, like that phrase almost, that's one of those, like you put up on the refrigerator, God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. But then it says this, humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. So let's go back to what I mentioned about how pride has these two slopes, arrogance and self-pity, arrogance and insecurity. You mentioned to me in conversation earlier, Gen Z. What is the biggest thing that all the literature coming out about Gen Z is telling us? It's telling us that it's a generation absolutely immersed in anxiety. Young men get to the diving board of dating. They don't know what to do. They're over anxious about it. They don't date. You've got guys in their late 20s now that don't know how to date a girl.
They're not getting married.
Not getting married. They're scared. They're 28 going, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I can't figure it out. They're still playing video games and not out getting jobs. And I don't mean that in a slighting way. What I mean is the social science literature is identifying for us that there's a serious epidemic of anxiety that's happened. There's a lot of stopping and overassessment. There's a lot of insecurity that's surfacing, right? And I find it interesting that in the text of scripture, lo and behold, it's not just the issue of arrogance that is tackled by humility, but it actually is the issue of anxiety that's also tackled by humility. Can you be the kind of person that doesn't seek your own self-interest, but can humble yourself before God and say, God, I don't know. I need to depend upon you. I need to be the kind of man who like I said in that talk, you got to be the kind of man that can say four things. Okay, the kind of man that can say, I don't know.
Okay.
And you're okay not knowing. It's not a bruise to your ego to go, I don't know what to do. Can you be the kind of person that can say, I was wrong. I was wrong. Full stop, put a period. Not a but,
no excuses.
not an explanation, not a you did this, not a here's why I did it. All these things. Just that I was wrong. Can you be the kind of person that can say, I am sorry. I'm sorry.
And just leave it there.
And leave it, and not worry about the what the other person has to clean on their side of the street, and just let it rest there. And can you be the kind of person that can say, fourthly, can you help me? Can you help me? I was out on a run the other day at a men's retreat. I was for our church. I'm out on this run, and I'm running up in the mountains, beautiful mountains of Utah, with two guys that are just young studs next to me. I mean, these guys are just studs. One guy's a chiropractor. He's in great shape. And the other guy is I can't even really get, he's works with like federal law enforcement. This guy's a bomb tech. This guy's like decorated military. And we're out on a run, right? We're going. And so as we're running, I'm talking to them about manhood. And I said, guys, one of the things I found is that guys have a hard time saying, I need to be taught how to be a man. And as I'm listening to these guys, right, I'm sensing, I think these guys would benefit from being taught how to be a man. And I told them, I said, I own two guns. I know nothing about them. Nothing. Okay. I've been to the gun range once, and I have gone one other time shooting skeet. That's it. But I got two pistols. Okay. Now, what I need is people who can teach me. These guys could teach me. It's great. But I got to be able to say, I don't know. I can't start talking and read a gun magazine, start bloviating and talking like I know all about guns. What I need to do is say, guys, can you teach me? Can we go to the range? Can you give me gun safety? Can you help me become a good shooter? Can you help me handle this weapon well? Guess what? Manhood is a weapon in a way.
Yeah.
You can weaponize for the best things in the world. You can change the world as a man, or you can destroy your family as a man.
Yeah.
You got to be able to say, can you teach me? Can you teach me? So I
That's
think
good.
one of the things here that I see with him is his self-seeking gets in the way. So why does that happen? Well, here's kind of the reason why. In verse 6, his father had never at any time displeased him. The word displeased there means in Hebrew, it's like he never grieved him. He never made him feel bad by asking him, why have you done thus and so? In other words, David never said, son, that's stupid. He never said, son, why'd you do that? Right? He never wanted to disappoint him, so he enabled his behavior. And when I was speaking at the conference, I put up on the screen this statement, and it comes from, I'm going to read these two verses from Proverbs, and I want to give this statement because I think this is an important statement. This is Proverbs 9:8 and 9. Proverbs 9:8 and 9 say this: do not reprove a scoffer,
Okay.
or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he'll love you. Give instruction to a wise man, and he'll be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he'll increase in learning. And here's a statement I put up on the screen. Rebuke harnesses the momentum presented by your character.
I was going to ask you about that. Unpack that.
Yeah, I remember years ago, I had two men in the church came to me. This was kind of in the throes of stuff with my dad. And I was going through a lot emotionally. And they said, can we tell you something? I said, sure. And they said, your preaching has become angry.
Ooh.
I'm angry. It's not
My
that you're
wife
saying-
said that to me one time.
Yeah. That's hard to hear.
Yeah.
I mean, like, preaching's vulnerable, right? I mean, you get out there, you're putting all these ideas in front of everybody. You're opening yourself sometimes. And so they said, your preaching has become angry. And I didn't respond great. I was like, yeah, you guys don't know. And, I'm just convinced and convicted and blah, 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 blah. And I took that and I reflected on that. And the Lord wouldn't get me away from those words. And you know what? I ended up sharing with him, you guys were right. I remember one of those guys, I told him, you told me that? You were right. You're right. And had become angry. And a lot of that was born on stuff in my personal life, but they were right. And what I needed to do was to receive it. And if you're a kind of teachable person, and then you'll receive a rebuke and it will give life to you. But if your character is unteachable, then to go back to that fork of humility and humiliation, you'll double down in humiliation. Okay. Now, God, I don't take any credit for this, but God has blessed me to be someone who's teachable. That's important. If I wasn't teachable, I don't think I should be a pastor. I think any pastor that's not teachable should quit the ministry. He'll destroy lives. When you see a life blow up in front of you, like I saw with my dad, you're faced with questions. Bryan, do you believe that could happen to you?
Okay.
Do you believe in the power of the gospel? This man taught you the gospel. Do you believe that this gospel is still powerful in your life and that you need to lean into the acknowledgement of your own brokenness? Otherwise, pride will ravage you. Do you believe that? And so what I found is that if I can keep my character moldable, if I can keep my character sensitive to the observations of others without letting my ego produce a veneer of essentially an insecure bravado, then I can harness what that rebuke can give. And the rebuke becomes life-giving. It's the kind of thing that says, man, you can move forward with a new tool in your bag.
Let me ask you this. This is really clear for guys who are in vocational ministry. But what about guys in general who face older men who are always criticizing them? In other words, and let me just give you my context and yours, but being in vocational ministry, we are always having people tell us things. And there's got to be a balance in knowing, okay, this is a person, they are always criticizing, they're always complaining, putting up a boundary and just not listening. But yet, if we pray and if we're looking, God will put wise men in our lives. And knowing, okay, is this a voice? Yeah, this guy's, I just need to, just throw it away. And okay, this is a guy that I respect. I know he loves Jesus. I need the fruit. I see the fruit. I need to listen to what's being put in front of me here. How can you speak to that, finding the balance between the two?
It's great. A couple things. First, credibility does matter. Okay, so that's the first thing. I'm not out to simply open myself to every and any source as though all sources are equal. They're not all equal. So credibility does matter. That's the first thing. But secondly, there's a difference between criticism and rebuke.
Okay.
And that's an important thing. I think, to know.
Yeah.
And it has to do with what the person's trying to accomplish with them. So if those guys had said, your preaching's angry, and they did it because they wanted to tear me down, then I would, and maybe even I should be less inclined to listen to them. It doesn't mean there's not truth in it. There might be, and I should hunt for truth in anything. I think that's helpful. However, if I know that the person actually is for me, if I know that this person is attempting to, in some way, like they don't have a horse in this race, there's not something they gain in it, then I have to sit with it and I have to say, okay, that moves toward rebuke. That moves toward something that's trying to birth.
That's good. That's good.
And so, but again, it kind of collapses back where we started. I don't think an unteachable man can know the difference between criticism and rebuke.
Okay.
And I think what happens is an unteachable person sees all rebuke as criticism.
Yeah.
You're always on me, man. And all of a sudden they've put any kind of thing that goes against their predispositions into a file folder and labeled it criticism.
Okay.
And I want to say, just stop for a moment.
Slow down.
Ask yourself, is it true? Ask yourself, is the source credible? And ask yourself if the person is speaking for my betterment. If all three of those are checked, you need to shut your pie hole and listen.
What are those three again?
So you want to ask, is it true? Is this person for me? Right? Is it for me? And are they credible? If all those things check off, then I need to shut my pie hole and listen. And if I've got questions about some of those, well, maybe I have to temper it. Maybe I misunderstand one of them. Like, for example, I could assume you're not for me, but I might also be reading past wounds into you.
Yeah.
I got to be careful about that.
Yeah.
So
There's some triggers.
So a teachable man, and this goes to maybe a fourth piece of that, but this is only for a teachable man. A teachable man has to be able to be honest about his own heart. And that's where I have to be honest about my heart. If you say something to me, Steve, and I bristle at it, and that's my first response, even if I don't know yet if you're criticizing me or giving me a life-giving rebuke, even if I'm not sure, if my initial response is to kind of bristle, it says more about me than it does about you.
Yeah. How is that? How is my response about me? How is this about me?
That's right. If I'm self-defensive, then that shows that you've struck an insecurity in me. And I need to tend to that insecurity in a big way, because that insecurity will eat my lunch. Most anger, as we said, comes out of hurt and insecurity. And most guys running around, I mean, it's always great. You know these people, and this happens with men a lot. Men, put on a shirt, lions, not sheep, and don't tread on me, and all this kind of stuff, right? And that makes us feel like we're a real man. We're not putting up with this anymore. And we say things like, dude, I don't really care what you think about me, man. I'm just, And I when somebody says that, I know that they are deeply insecure.
Yeah.
They actually are saying that because they care intensely what I think.
Yeah. They want to know that that they're tough. Yeah.
So they're putting out the veneer of manhood so that we don't get into what's actually in the deep. Because what's happening in the deep, that's the insecurity that's coming out with their wife, with their children, with their workplace, how they're coping with life. That's where the deep stuff sits, man.
Yeah.
And that's why Proverbs says, a heart of a man is deep waters, right? Heart of deep waters. And it takes somebody of skill to get down and kind of say, okay, let's see what's going on here. So let me give you the fourth.
Yeah. What's number four? What's number four?
So the third, by the way, if I was just to state it, is that an untaught man reviles restraint and rebuke. He reviles it. He doesn't want it. So therefore, he doesn't want to be displeased in any way, and he stays away from people who will displease him by their words. So then I'll read verse 6 again. His father never at any time displeased him by asking, why have you done thus and so? He was also a very handsome man. And so when I see things like that in a text of scripture interpretively, I'm like, why tell me that? And the answer is because there's something going on. It's like going back to Abishag. Why you got to tell me she's beautiful? Well, because we're testing for virility here. Why you tell me he's a handsome man? He was born next after Absalom. And why do you couple it with telling me his connection to Absalom, right?
Because that was one of Absalom's deals. Hey, look at me. I'm GQ or whatever it is.
100%. So that's the fourth thing, is an untaught man engages life with a sense of entitlement. He feels like
I deserve this.
The party is here for him.
Yeah.
And if you don't get it, that's on you, because I'm the one that this thing is supposed to revolve around. Now, I get most men are never going to say that. Okay, never going to say that.
But they might act that way.
Oh, let me tell you, the guy who comes home, who's worked all day, who comes home, who's got 3 little kids, and his wife has been wrangling them all day, and he comes home and he puts his feet up and he gets upset at her because she doesn't have dinner made and the dishes aren't done. Instead of him coming home and saying, sweetheart, I bet you are under it. Let me do the dishes. Hey, should we order out tonight? If he is not the man leading from 5 to 9 because he's so exhausted because of 9 to 5, then he's a man who it's not just easy to go, well, he's just tired, he's exhausted. No, it's more than that. He's entitled. He works and he thinks that his payment should come from 5 to 9 from his family. It's not coming, and it shouldn't come. What he needs to do is embrace the life of the joyful pursuit of a life of sacrificial service. And he does that by giving his best, as Steve Farrar used to famously say, from 5 to 9 instead of 9 to 5. The problem is he's a man who actually is internally out of control because he wants what he wants when he wants it. And until he looks in the mirror and acknowledges that, he won't change. So Proverbs 25:28 says this: a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. In the ancient world, what happens? The city gets ravaged, pillaged, if the walls are destroyed.
Yeah.
Self-control is a man's walls. Entitlement brings it down. And then we get to number 5. And this was my favorite point.
Let me say this real quick.
Yeah.
I think that there's a key rabbit trail in there, if you will, because we're talking about the man identity. We've got so many young men who are lost in so many ways, and we want them to know that they are created in the image of God. They are created with purpose. They need to live that purpose out. But there's this tension, this balance, because, dude, it's not all about you. God created you with purpose. King David said that, he was knitted together in his mother's womb. There's that, but it's God that is at the center, not us. And part of the way we work our identity out is by serving those around us, in particular, yes, our wives and families. It's not, we are not the center of attention.
So Steve, if a man comes into your home, into your living room, and he speaks harshly, he speaks angrily to your wife, and he attempts to intimidate her physically,
he's done.
He's done, bud. He's done. You'll remove him from the home under any means necessary, right? I mean, that's going to happen. Why? Because you are your wife's protector. Here's what every man needs to know. The chances of that happening are largely pretty thin. It can happen, but that's fairly rare. Who is the man that my wife needs to be protected from most often? Me.
Sometimes it's us. Yeah.
It's me.
We got to check
because
ourselves.
I'm the one that's short. I'm the one that's entitled. I'm the one that gets angry. I'm the one that just says things with a little edge. I'm the one that knows her weak spots. I'm the one who gets frustrated by these things that happen again and again and again. And what I have to learn is that I am the man I need to protect my wife from. And only a man of self-control and humility can even
That's good.
affirm that.
Yeah. So what's number 5?
Number 5. So this is my favorite point of it all. The text goes on, right? And it lists these guys, but the listing is important. It says, verse 7, he conferred with Joab, the son of Zeruiah, and Abiathar the priest, and they followed Adonijah and helped him. And the reason, first, just to mention something there, these are guys that were with David a long time. And so these are like the OGs of David's world, like these are original gangsters, man, of David's world. These were the guys that were very loyal to Judah. And you remember, if any of our listeners are a student of the Bible, early on in David's reign, there was a little bit of a challenge bringing Judah and Israel together. And so these guys were some of the original guard. So Adonijah's strategic. He dips back in to sort of create an epicenter of people in Judah that will follow him in the immediacy of where he's at. And he gets Joab and Abiathar alongside him. And they followed Adonijah and helped him. But Zadok the priest, Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and Nathan the prophet, Shimei and Ray, and David's mighty men were not with Adonijah. Then it says Adonijah sacrificed sheep, oxen, fat, and cattle by the serpent stone, which is beside En-Rogel, and he invited all his brothers, the king's son, and all the royal officials of Judah. He's going to have a party. And then the text says this, as he's launching his movement to the kingship. It says this, but he did not invite Nathan the prophet, or Benaiah or the mighty men, or Solomon his brother. Now, why does the text, again, these details matter, why does the text mention these 3 guys? It lumps Benaiah with the mighty men because Benaiah was one of the mighty men and was a leader among the mighty men.
He's the guy that killed the lion in a pit on a snowy day.
On a snowy day,
he's a tough guy.
That's right. That's from 2 Samuel 23:20. Yeah. So he kills an Egyptian that's a big, mighty soldier. He kills some soldiers that look like they're like specialist soldiers of Moab, and he kills a lion in a pit on a snowy day, the text says in 2 Samuel 23:20. Here's the point. Who was Nathan? Nathan was the guy who was the prophet who approached David when he sinned with Bathsheba and confronted him.
Convicted him.
Nathan is the guy who he'll later, even after this text, I mean, Nathan is the guy that will help Bathsheba in regard to David to secure the kingship for Solomon. Nathan is indicative of one of the kinds of men that you need around you. Benaiah is indicative of that, one of the kinds of men, and so is Solomon. So here's the 5th point. An untaught man won't lead with lions.
Yeah, I love the way you say that. I love the way you say that.
He won't lead with them. So what does that mean? It means this. He needs 3 kinds of men around him. The first one is he needs a Nathan, also known as a man who will tell you what you don't want to hear. You got to have a man who you will say, I will listen to you when you tell me something I do not want to hear.
Wow, that's good. That's
so I have an accountability partner. He's a pastor of a campus for a larger church in Chicagoland. I was just with him a week before this podcast here. And he and I, outside of my wife, there's no one who knows my inner life more than this man. There's no one in his life outside of his wife that knows his inner life more than me. There is not a hidden corridor. It is all open. The insecurities, the temptations, the failures, the repentance. And he has full license. Full license. If he opens his mouth to speak into my life, I will shut my mouth and I will listen. He's earned all that right. And I've earned all of it in his life. And why do I have him in my life? Well, one, he's a great friend and I enjoy him. But you know another reason is because I need to run with a lion. And I need a lion who I will say, if you say it, I'm going to assume you're right until proven otherwise. I'm going to assume that. I'm going to operate on that. Secondly, I need a Benaiah. A Benaiah is a man who is stronger than I am in a given area. Like, it doesn't have to be every area, but there's an area I want to grow in. I need a guy who's better than me. I need a guy who's stronger than me. I need a boulder who's further upstream than I am. And I got to have that kind of guy. I got a guy in San Diego. This guy's 72 years old, pastored a large church for years, retired. He works with pastors now, and he's a boulder upstream is what I call him for me. He's the guy that I go, hey, man, for me, I turned 50 back in February. And I told him back a year ago, we were together, and I said, I'm going to turn 50. His name is Dennis. And I said, Dennis, I'm going to turn 50. Can you tell me, what do I need to know for the next decade? What do I need to know? What's around a bend? What's the waters that are going to hit me? And man, he went into it with me. It was invaluable. I need a guy who's stronger than I am in a given area who can give me wisdom. And then probably the hardest one, because it's the most ego kind of challenging, is I need a Solomon. And that is, I need somebody who's a peer, whose status rivals my own. I need somebody who, when I hear
he was
them,
actually a little bit younger.
I need somebody who when they preach, I go, I think he might be better than me.
Yeah.
I need somebody who, when they make a leadership decision, I go, dang, wow, that's pretty. I got a friend that I talk with once a week. He's a pastor up in Seattle. This guy is a great preacher, man. This guy leads a church larger than mine. And I listen, and he listens to me. He views me as a Solomon alongside him. But I'm going to tell you, he's a Solomon. And sometimes he might say something and I go, I don't know. But I'm wrestling, man. I see and I go, okay, that man makes me better by me running in the fields with him. And I could yield. I could go, man, I remember going up and touring his church. Man, that's a big building. They got some awesome stuff. And I could leave that building going, man, I feel kind of sheepish about what I'm doing. Or I could leave going, praise God for a Solomon. I can learn from that guy. I can grow next to him. We can run together in this thing, in this life. And so you got to have these three kind of guys. Someone will tell you what you don't want, someone stronger than you, and someone whose status rivals your own. And I think if you do that, you put checks on your own ego. And I'll be honest with you, Steve, the lion's share of discipleship is the checking of your own ego.
Wow, that's huge. Bryan, that reminds me of a big fat book. I don't know, it's got like a bazillion footnotes in it, but the title of the book is A Team of Rivals. And it's all about Abraham Lincoln and looking at his cabinet. Well, who did Lincoln put on his cabinet? He put guys on his cabinet that ran against him for president. He had guys on his cabinet who thought they could be a better president than he was. And you look at some of the decisions that he made, that some of these decisions were checked by the other guys on his cabinet. And that takes a lot of humility. And what we know Lincoln as being one of our best presidents, he had a lot of humility in there, thinking the mission of preserving the Union or whatever, the mission's more important than my ego.
Yep. 100%.
Bryan, usually I ask a guy that I have the opportunity to talk with, if you had an opportunity, you had a young guy in front of you, age 15 to 25. I always include teenagers as being men, because teenager is actually a new term. You were, up till 100 years ago, you were either a boy, you were a man. There's none of this in between stuff. So 15, 25, I usually ask someone, if you only had one opportunity to share one piece of advice, what would it be? But here's what I want to ask you, something specific. If you had a young man, Bryan, in front of you who was saying, I need some lions in my life. I got to get some lions in my life. How do I get lions into my life? How would you answer that question?
Well, you go on safari, because they're not coming to you.
Okay,
So
you got to go find them.
You got to go find them. And so what you do is you say, okay, who alongside me right now is pursuing the Lord? Get the peer first. That's the easiest one, because it's already within your social strata. You're already probably connected at some level, or you're aware of. Maybe it's a kid in youth group with you. Maybe it's a college student that you're with. Maybe it's a young man who works with you on a job. Maybe it's a cousin, somebody. But get somebody that you'd go, okay, here is a peer. Now, maybe they're running after the Lord, or maybe you find out they want to run after the Lord. So you start running together, right?
Okay.
And one of you is going to outpace the other a little bit here, there, in different ways, but you run together. So you get that peer first. Then you begin to look. And as a young man, what I would say is, you need to think about, and I use this phrase a lot. I used it in what I said a moment ago to you. I use the phrase boulders upstream. And I want to say something about why I use that phrase. I use that because rivers change. Rivers don't stay the same.
Mm-hmm.
And rivers always bring new rapids. They always bring new currents. There's always new logs coming down and all those kind of things. And what you need is somebody who has taken on those waters ahead of you, who's further along. So I am a committed, huge proponent of what I call multi-generational discipleship.
Mm.
You're not going to get a bunch of wisdom by just getting a bunch of 15 to 25-year-olds together and expect that somehow great ideas are going to emerge. What you're going to do is, if you are 20 years old, find somebody who at 30 years old looks like a 30-year-old you'd like to be like.
Mm.
Then look at somebody who's 50 and say, what's a 50-year-old that I want to look like, and find that person, and then find a 70-year-old.
Mm.
Get three out in front of you where you can say, along the stages, I want to look like these guys, and get with them, talk to them, ask them questions, find out. When I sit with my 72-year-old friend, he doesn't come with the agenda. I do.
Wow. Yeah.
I do. I want to know. I want to find out. When I sat with a mentor of mine who is another mentor of mine who is 25, almost 30 years older than me. When I was 40 years old, he had raised 2 daughters. We sat in a diner. This guy, I'll save his name, but he's one of the most widely published, brilliant philosophers in the world. And I'm sitting in a diner with him, just the two of us. And I said, hey, can you tell me, like, I have 3 daughters.
Mm.
How do you vet young men when they come through? What is it that you do, and how do you handle it? What's that look like? So he said, let me tell you about it. So he tells me. And then I said, listen, can you tell me what I need to know for the next 20 years from 40 to 60? And he said, I'll tell you 4 things. Boom, 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 boom. He told me 4 things. I'm going after him.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what I would tell a young man. It's your life. Live it. It's your life. Happen to it.
Yeah.
It's your life. Take the bull by the horns. But you don't take the bull by the horns by don't tread on me. You don't take it by the horns by saying lions, not sheep. You take it by saying lions run with lions.
I just love that.
I need you in my life.
I need some
and I
lions
don't know
with.
everything. Help me.
Bryan, if someone wants to get more of your teaching, what is the name of your church?
Yeah.
And what is the name of the organization that you write some for?
Sure.
I know that you wrote a book. Where can people find more information about
So first they can go to lifelinecommunity.com, lifelinecommunity.com. That's the name of our church. It's a church I founded 21 years ago in a suburb of Salt Lake City, Utah, which is Utah has its own unique challenges.
Yes,
and so
yeah.
apologetically. They can also get in touch with Better Man. Better Man is now the largest men's ministry in America. It's in 60 countries.
Mm.
Just a little over 750,000 men have gone through Better Man. And so I've done some curriculum writing with Better Man. I'm part of their national speaking team and one of their video teachers. And so you can get a lot of teaching with Better Man. And as a young man, I can't recommend a better resource for you to just start there with Better Man. I think it'll really assist you and help you in a wide variety of ways. Additionally, if you want some other things, you can go to discipleship.org. There's a free ebook that I wrote called Cohort.
Okay.
It's about multi-generational discipleship in the local church and how to implement it. Like, not just like theory, but like, hey, here's what we implemented. I've done some consult work with other churches on how they can implement multi-generational discipleship in their churches for men and women in gender-based discipleship as an approach to the local church. There's a book as well that I wrote called, and it's a funky title, but it's called Tasty Jesus. And it's a cultural critique about, it's a little more intellectual, but it's a cultural critique about the way that Jesus is wrongly viewed by the American church, and how we can help restore that to them. You can also pick up, if you want more apologetic flavored stuff, I wrote a chapter in a book called Sharing the Good News with Mormons. That was edited by Sean McDowell and another friend of mine named Eric Johnson. So there's a few things out there. You can check those things out. And that's kind of a little bit about me.
Amazing. Bryan, what's the name of your wife? What's the name of your bride, and how long have you been married?
Her name is Jennifer. Jennifer and I have been married for 28 and a half years, and we have 3 daughters. One will be 26 in November, one is 22, and one is 17. And that's its own amazing. So my wife's the oldest of 6, and I'm an only child. When we did premarital counseling, it's a true story. We did premarital counseling, and the counselor was a 70-year-old Bible college president who had pastored his whole life. And he gave us it was called an MMPI, Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Test. So we take this test, and it charts you on different things and personality traits in your life. And he's going to give us the results. We come for a session number 2, we come in. He moves around the desk, pulls our chairs apart, puts his chair in the middle, puts his arm around both of us, and he leans to both of us and he says, "Hey, I want you to know we got the results of your personality test." And he said, "By all laws of psychology, your marriage will never work. But you both love Jesus, so you'll be okay." And what he then proceeded to tell us, it was like prophetic. The first 5 years of our marriage were hard, man. Hard. I had so much selfishness I had to wear off. We had growing up to do. And then the next 5 years were like looking across the sea of tranquility to see what life could be like in a distant land. Yeah. We're like, oh, we could be like that. So we started repairing for the next 5 years. Then the last 18 years have been life with my best friend, and amazing, right? But a real marriage, difficult as challenge, but a real marriage, but life together. But I learned through that. And that's part of the, I could talk about that, but that's part of the teachable story is, can you be teachable? Can you let your wife?
In your marriage.
Yeah, can you be teachable in your marriage? Better be.
I think the lesson there for young men is don't be afraid, get married young, and it's going to be tough, but the best days are going to be further down the trail. It's going to be tough, but further down the trail.
As the great theologian Bruce Arians, who coached Tampa Bay Buccaneers, said, "No risk it, no biscuit."
Bryan, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Steve, this interview, it was really good. I enjoyed it. It was very edifying for me.
It was solid. It was solid.
Very solid. So I think one of the first things I would like to just point out, and this has been my own experience, is that being a teachable person, because there's a lot of people that want to be, or say they want to be taught, but I don't think they really do. Having that teachable spirit is only a horse that God can break. I like that, the way that he put that. And I think, and I say that, and I emphasize that because I don't think it's necessarily that you even realize that you're unteachable. It's that you go through these circumstances in life where you're faced with all these issues, especially being, in your marriage. It's like I've said before, it's like holding up a mirror to you constantly. And you either have to lean into, I'm really broken. I'm messing these things up constantly. I'm messing this up. Do you double down, or do you lean into that brokenness? And I think, like I said, that's only a horse God can break by giving those circumstances to you, by giving that timing. His timing's perfect with everything, but that's a horse only God can break. And I like the way he put that, because I found that to be true in my own life. Is through that, through these trials and tribulations I've gone through, is kind of how I've realized, okay, I haven't been very teachable. Lord, how do I be teachable? You know?
Yeah, and I can concur with that on two fronts. One, just my observation with other men that sometimes you can tell pretty quick. And again, I've been in vocational ministry over 30 years. I've been doing this for a long time. And there are occasions when I'm talking with a guy and I could figure out pretty quick how serious they are.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned is when they're not serious, I just need to step back, because without meaning to be harsh, I'm just wasting my time.
Right.
And it comes to a point where they have to be broken. But as an older man, I can look back over my life and I can say, oh yeah, I thought I was pretty teachable there, but I also thought I had everything figured out. And maybe I could have avoided some big mistakes there if I would have done what the older guy had suggested. And I think there's this moment, what he was talking about is that sometimes we can try to encourage a guy, we can try to teach him, but it's not going to get in until God breaks them and they come to a point where they are just completely even humiliated,
right?
And in a healthy way, where they're willing to say, okay, I'm going to shut up. You say it, I do it. And sometimes that's what has to happen first.
Yeah. And I like that was part of his story. It was like, he's puffed up, he thought like, oh, I'm about to knock their socks off, make them all repent right here. And then he gets up there and just goes blank and just stares. And I'm like, I lucky, I'm very blessed that I never thought I was going to knock anybody's socks off with my, presentations when I was in school or grad school or whatever. But I can imagine the fear.
But there's always something for all of us.
Yes. Yeah. There is an event like that for all of us. But man, I was just thinking, I'm like, dude, I'm so glad that never happened to me, because I hated giving presentations. I never really thought I was going to do good, but we'll touch on this in a second, but that comes from insecurity, anxiety. But yeah, I was just like, man, what a way to break him. It's just, I like the way that he put God. He's like, okay, I'm gonna make you look like an idiot. He's like, it's just funny. I feel like God has a sense of humor. We kind of see these moments as like a very impactful, like really anxiety inducing moment, but he's probably up there just like, all right, man, this is what I'm going to do to you, So I like that a lot. But with that, why don't we touch on kind of what he talked about, being the pride, I don't remember how he described the pyramid, or, the top is pride. And on one side of this arrogance, which is what people see in people.
That was a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's what people see. They're like, oh, they're just arrogant, talking about like, what people thought about his dad. He goes, well, no, I think there's something deeper. And I like that you emphasize that. And we'll get to the other side is insecurity. I like that you emphasize under anger, under these emotions like anger, that the emotion that's portrayed or how people act in a more reactive way, there's something deeper. And I like that, because I think most men don't realize that, or don't realize how to get to it, which is it in my experience, it's been through all these trials that you either, like I said, you double down or you face it and you lean into that brokenness and you figure out what it is. And I think that's so we'll kind of get into the insecurities here, and I can kind of speak to this in my own life in many ways, actually. So I touched on this with the interview we did with Steve Spicer, but I put a lot of my value growing up, and I think subconsciously in my adult life, in my accomplishments and my intelligence and my performance. Just because my parents were critical, and I got criticism as a kid, but the times I felt valued or loved, and like my parents are proud of me, was when I accomplished things, whether it was in the sports I was playing or whether it was in my academic, pursuits. And so I was always the kid in school that I did great because that's what I put my value in. That's where I felt my value, is if I did good in school, or if I did good at this. And it's not like I logically thought that, but that's where I felt worth something, where I felt worthy. Was when I was doing something right, when I was doing something good. So in later in life as an adult, I got my bachelor's, I got my master's, and it's like, I never try to say like, oh, I have my master's degree, but it's like that's kind of something I feel on the inside. It's like, oh, I might know just a little more than you about this topic or something, and that is prideful, that is arrogant. And I never like consciously thought that, but I know that I felt that way. Now, anytime I've been challenged on something, or somebody, or I perceive somebody's perceiving me as stupid or treats me that way, that's when I get that defensive,ness, that anger comes out, because it's, you think I'm stupid, therefore you think I'm valueless, right? And it's not like I ever consciously made that connection, but I would know I'd react out of just like that feeling, that gut. It's like a knee jerk reaction to like, I just get angry if I thought somebody thought I was stupid. So that's where a lot of my insecurity comes from on a personal level is, what do other people think of me? And it's as much as I have in my life said this, just like Bryan said, when somebody says, I don't care what you think of me, well, they probably care a lot about what they think.
Yeah.
And so I've said in my life, I don't care what people think of me. But the reality is I care a lot about what people think of me, which is something I'm trying to learn to deal with now. Because it's like, okay, well, how do I take my value and my identity as a child of God? Because if I can take that and put my value in that and know what my worth is to my Heavenly Father, I'm not going to feel so strongly when somebody makes me feel like I'm stupid, or when I think somebody thinks poorly of me or thinks I'm stupid, or, doesn't trigger that insecurity in me. So I'm at this weird point in my life where it's like, I've made these realizations, like in these interviews, these men are talking about, but I'm working through now, how do I practically deal with this? How do I work through this? How do I change the way I think about these things? So that's why I really liked this interview with Bryan, because he touched a lot on I'm like, man, this is exactly what I've gone through. He's exactly right. He hit the nail on the head. Hoping to learn to deal with this more. And I think that's the thing is with most young men, they experience these feelings. They experience this anger. They experience that defensiveness or that pride. But the question is, where does that come from?
Yeah. Well, two things come to mind. One is what Bryan said toward the end, when he was talking about being able to receive rebuke and things like that. And there's this question of when you bristle up, you don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but you bristle up. Well, that's coming from somewhere. So that. But then I'm thinking about a gentleman who died about a year ago. His name is Alan Algram, and he is the founder of a group called Covenant Connections, which is really good for pastors, and I participate in that. And Alan would say a lot of times that heart work is hard work. The point being that part of being a man is being willing to go deep and ask some questions. Okay, why am I having this knee-jerk reaction? What's going on there? And being willing to be honest and just open up the chest and say, okay, well, this is why. And there's this tension. We want to be strong, and we have to be strong. We have to be strong for the people around us. We have to be strong to do our job. But part of being strong is being honest as well. We can think about even a Navy SEAL. There's a sense of, I'm on my mission, but I get shot in the leg. Well, yeah, I'm going to keep going the best I can, but it also means that I'm going to bend down when I can and put a bandage around it so I don't bleed out. Being willing to address it. So I think that comes to the point of, asking some hard questions about why am I reacting the way I am? And then looking at the questions, and Bryan didn't really put them as questions in the podcast or the sermon, but more of observations about Adonijah and an unteachable man, and that's the way I kind of recorded it. This is what an unteachable man is. An unteachable man is prone to pride, and asking ourselves, do I care if I'm number one or not? Do I care if I look good or not? Do I care if I've got 50 horses, leading, my way? And, walking down through those 5 points and asking those about that. You mentioned the other side of pride as well, Matthias. And again, there's a tension. Sometimes guys, they really are just arrogant. They think they're, I just don't want to be around people like that. But the truth is, where did that come from? And a lot of times it comes from a brokenness. And, you mentioned some cleft notes on your story. And I could even think of mine, that I grew up with a number of father figures coming in and out of my life. I grew up not being good at a whole lot of things. I wasn't a good athlete. I wasn't the best in band. I wasn't the best at academics. It took me forever to learn how to read, just not a lot of good stuff. But when I got to Bible college, I realized that I've got some God-given ability to preach better than other guys can. And when you look at the theological world or the religious world or the church world, it's called homiletics, which is the discipline of preparing sermons, in short. And I figured out pretty quick that I've got some skill there. And part of the brokenness was along the lines of, okay, I suck at everything else, but oh wow, God's given me a gift here, and I'm going to use this gift, and I'm going to preach, and thousands of people are going to come to Christ. And I get out there, did the mission work, came back to the States, and I'm preaching. And you know what? Thousands of people are not coming to Christ. And I had to reckon with that thousands of people coming to Christ or not coming to Christ is not an indication as to whether or not God thinks I'm good or not. Whether or not I've got the skill or not, because God can bring people to Christ whether the preacher is good or not. So I had to learn how to celebrate my own gift, to work in my own gift, to get better in my own gift, to hone the craft, but being at peace whether or not people come to Jesus or not. I have to have a security in being who I am, who God created me to be, not out of pride, not out of self-seeking, being able to receive rebuke when someone else says, hey, you could have done that better or whatever, but getting my identity in Christ and being able to learn how to get better, because we have the ability to get better until the day we die. And the only thing that gets in the way of us getting better is an attitude of being an unteachable man.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me to what you were talking about, or what Bryan was talking about with those two men who came to him after he was dealing with some stuff with his dad. He said, Bryan, your sermons are getting a little bit more angry. And, his first initial response is to get defensive, no, like this and that. And that ability to take criticism that he touches on, kind of like what you said, you bristle, do you bristle it off? And that's something I've realized too, is I've never dealt with criticism well, because, when people criticize me, they're telling me I'm wrong, telling me I'm stupid, telling me I'm valueless. Not that they're actually telling me that, but that's what I'm internalizing.
That's the way it's received. Yeah.
That's the way it's received. Right.
Yeah.
And so in marriage, especially, my wife is one of the strongest women I've ever met. And we could both be a little emotionally reactive, but that's not the point. I've had my insecurities, I've had my flaws pointed at me in quite an aggressive way. And I've had to learn how to, and not all the time. I'm not saying everything's bad or we're bad at communication all the time or anything like that. It's something we've had to work on, which is the beauty of marriage. But all that to say is I've had to learn how to go, and it's something I actually just realized, I think, in our last argument, is that I go, even when she's trying to tell me something, and I feel the need to defend to her that I am not, this wasn't my intention. I'm not evil. I'm not a bad person. I'm not, stupid, because this was my intention. I'm sorry that I did that, but this was my intention. I'm not this person. And all the while, she's
always
not
having to defend herself.
Yeah, and all the while, she's not telling me, I think you're evil. I think you have bad intention. She's just telling me, this is what you're doing. This is how you're acting. And I'm perceiving she thinks I'm evil. She thinks I'm horrible. She hates me. She, whatever. And it's the timing of this interview is crazy, because in that I'm realizing I don't have to defend myself. Why do I feel like the need? Do I think I'm evil? Is that where my insecurity is coming from? Do I need to lean in that and say, Lord, I'm broken. Without your spirit, I am an evil person. Without you guiding me in this life, without you leading my spirit, my sin is wicked. I need to lean into that and go, you know what? I am a broken person. And that's okay, because the Lord's working on me. That's okay, because I can take this brokenness and tell my wife, I'm sorry that, I've been failing in this way. You're right. I don't want to do that. I don't have to defend. I don't have to defend my personality or my intentions or my character. So it's something that is learning to take that criticism without feeling the need to defend yourself.
And that's a big part of the honesty. Bryan talked about, a lot of guys will say, I agree with that. And, I'm going to be honest about that. But real honesty means that I'm going to do something differently than what I was doing before. A biblical word would be repentance, which means to turn. That a real teachable man is going to see something here. They may bristle at first, but they're going to do the heart work to say, okay, what's going on? Then they're going to say, okay, is this an area that I really need to change? And then they're going to change, and then they're not going to blame anybody else. They're not going to defend themselves. They're going to calmly be able to say, okay, this is an issue. I mean, everybody blows it. Everybody blows it. Here is an issue where I have blown it. No excuses. I blew it. and they learn from that, and that makes them a teachable man. And then they can learn more, and then they can get further down the road. Like Bryan said, they can see where the next boulder is down the river.
Right. Yeah. And I think this also leads into, like he said, don't just take criticism from everybody, because there's some people that can give you criticism just to tear you down.
Yeah, and put up healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
There are some people that if you tell them the sky is blue, they're going to say, well, actually it's turquoise today. It's just, they're going to argue. And men, you do not have time for that nonsense. You don't have to be a jerk about it, but just don't waste your time.
Yeah. Don't
entertain it. Don't waste your time with people who are always critical and always criticizing. They've got their own work to do that they're not honest. They're not being honest with.
But I like that he defines who we can and who we should listen to. He said, and he gives some criteria, which I love. I love lists. He says, can I trust it?
Mm-hmm.
Does this person have my back? I don't remember this is exact phrasing he used. Do they have my back? Or are they for me? Is how he said it. And are they credible? Mm-hmm. So I think that's a good criteria list to look at. Because you don't, like we said, you don't want to take criticism. I'm sure, especially with you as a pastor, I'm sure you get all sorts of criticism from people who genuinely want to see things, want to see you get better or improve or grow on something. But I'm sure you get a lot of criticism from people who just want to complain about everything down to the temperature of the building, So I'm sure it especially you have an extra level of discernment. I'm trying to figure out, okay, where do I take this criticism from, or who do I take it from?
And sometimes it can be a criticism that's just petty. Hey, you said this wrong, or hey, you were on the wrong side of the street, or hey, whatever. Is it true? Okay, it was true, and can I learn about that? But having a spirit that's able to receive it, and and I don't know who said this the first time. I don't know where I heard this the first time, but there's value in being able to eat the meat and spit out the bones.
Yeah, there is. And that takes a level of discernment, but I think that just comes with time, with experience, with trials and tribulations in life, that you kind of learn, okay, what are the bones of this? What's the meat of this I can really take out of, and use and grow from.
So it was interesting to hear Bryan talk about Adonijah. When he opened this up, immediately I was thinking about Adonijah's older brother, Absalom. Absalom had a lot of issues, but he was also arrogant. He was also self-seeking. Mm-hmm. But you came to Adonijah, and I thought this is just a beautiful picture of a guy who felt like he was entitled, felt like he's going to set things up, everything for himself. And I really resonated with what he said. It was interesting when you get to that part in 1 Kings where he is saying, okay, I'm going to be king. Mm-hmm. And he surrounded himself with all the yes men. He did not surround himself with anybody that would tell him no. Mm-hmm. And that is a big, big illustration of someone who's just not teachable. They don't want to be teachable. And that's another reason, going back to Dr. Fleener last week, Matthias, why we need to be in the Word of God on a regular basis, because it is historical narrative after historical narrative of real men who have gone before us. And if we'll look at their lives, we can hold it up and say, okay, is that me? Yeah. So I think as we start to think about application, we could just look at his life and say, okay, have I done that? Mm-hmm. Am I doing that?
Yeah.
I thought about our very first episode where we had James, and James talked about the grandson of King David. King David was already dead, but Solomon took over the throne, and then King David's son Rehoboam was the king, and the people came to him and said, "Hey, your father was pretty tough. Are you going to relax a little bit?" And the wise men told Rehoboam, "Hey, just cool your jets, just love on the people, and they'll be loyal, and we'll work through this." Well, he blew it off. He blew it off. He went to his buds who were yes men, and they gave him dumb advice.
Yeah.
He went with that, and everything fell apart. So Rehoboam was not a teachable man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't remember which one it is that you said in the interview, the brother didn't learn from the mistakes of the other. Was that Adonijah?
Adonijah didn't learn from the mistakes of his
Right.
older brother Absalom. Absalom actually didn't wait for David to get close to death. He said, I'm going to do it now.
Yeah.
I'm going to rebel, and I'm going to do it now.
Mm.
And he was starting to get away with it, but there were enough people who stood up and said, yeah, this isn't going to happen. We're going to support the anointed king. It's really easy to get on the bandwagon, which is what a lot of people did.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, King David's a jerk. Absalom's the right guy. Let's follow Absalom. And they did, and they lost. And it got pretty messy pretty fast.
Yeah. Well, that made me think of something, man. This is an embarrassing thing for me, but there's a guy I kind of know online that streams, and he was streaming one time, and I joined in just randomly. I wasn't saying anything in the chat. I was just there, and he was defending himself against somebody that was attacking him in his chat. I'm like, oh man, like, it's like, why is he doing that? He really doesn't need to embarrass himself. Like, he could just ignore this guy. Like, he doesn't mean anything. And I was like, it's cringy. I would never do that. What happened a few weeks later? Somebody came into mind, said some things that triggered me. And I started defending myself. And right after I'd finished defending myself, I repented in front of my whole chat. And I said, chat, that was not how a godly man should handle the situation. I said, I'm genuinely embarrassed and I repent. And I was humbled in that moment. I still think about it. I thought about it for days after. I was like, it's like, why did I do that? I was like, I thought I was so much better than this guy. I would never respond like that. And then there I go, just a knee-jerk reaction, just had the same need for that defensiveness. And I was like, man, I didn't learn from my older brother, as you kind of put it with Ab.
Well, Matthias, being a teachable man doesn't mean we're always going to get it right. Your story reminds me of something that happened even in my life. My personal Facebook page.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. This happened maybe 6 months ago, probably less than that. And there are a couple people that just like to pick me. One guy, I refer to him as an angry atheist, and he just got on and he was just going off, and I just snapped. And I just gave him all the reasons why. And it's usually after the fact that you realize, hey, technically I'm right, but really, did I really need to do that? Yeah, I'm not sure. But the point is, Matthias, being a teachable man doesn't mean we're always going to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
But we see the mistakes and we own the mistakes and we say, okay, I blew that. I'm not going to blame anybody else. I blew it, and I'm going to get up and keep going forward. We all blow it sometimes. That's part of being a man. If you never blow it, that means you're never trying, or you're not honest with yourself. We all blow it, and we just admit it, and we get up and we keep going.
Yeah. It's hard. It's like I said, I think it takes that kind of humility to break somebody and to make them realize I'm not as teachable or I'm not as great as I think I am. It kind of tears down that pride. And I think we're given those two choices. Do you double down on it, or do you lean into your brokenness and say, Lord, I need some fixing here. Help me out.
Yeah. And maybe that would be part of the challenge this week. Thinking about the challenge, and I'm so glad we do this, Matthias. We hear podcasts that are good. They're entertaining, they're informative, but I really wanted our podcast to be one of, here is something I can do. And the first thing I want to do as a challenge is to go back to episode number 1. And if guys have not heard episode number 1, we're kind of setting the stage. And the challenge was to go find an older man and just ask for advice. It's so stinking simple. And so I would want to circle back to that. Guys, have you done that? If you didn't hear that challenge, the first thing is, to go find an older man, speak into your life. And that's another reason why it's so important that we're part of a community of Christ. And then another challenge, and I was thinking about this earlier today. I know that we probably have a couple ladies. We probably have a few ladies that are listening to the man identity, which is good. I would say to ladies, we're trying to describe the kind of guy that you want to get.
Yes.
If you're single, if you're a single lady looking for a man, I would say the challenge there, ladies, young ladies, if you're dating a guy who is not teachable, you need to drop him today.
Yes.
Like not tomorrow, today. Now, the hope is they would come to repentance, but don't think that, hey, if I'm nice, they're going to get together. If they're not teachable now, they're not going to be teachable until God breaks them. And don't waste your time.
And don't lie to yourself. You can't fix them.
Exactly. Now, I'd also throw it, change it around. You guys, if you're dating someone, a girl who is, they themselves are not teachable, just don't waste your time. All the time that you're burning being with this unteachable person is not time that you can be pursuing, the right person. And I think, again, to the challenge for this week, am I teachable? And just ask yourself, am I really listening to some older men? And if not, why? Some of our challenges are going to be very specific. Do this task. This is kind of one of the deeper challenges. Am I teachable? If not, why? Do the hard work to look into the heart and find out what's going on and be honest with it.
And then once you get to that point, that's when you can really start to deal with those issues, to deal with, if you don't know how to deal with it, So I think that's an important question to ask yourself. I think it's a good question to ask from this episode. Why? I think it's a good question to always ask yourself, but specifically about this. So that's a good challenge. I can think of the right word. Good challenge there.
Now, if you want more information about Dr. Bryan, we'll have everything in the show notes. He planted a church in the Salt Lake City area called Lifeline Community Church, and you can find the church on the website. He does videos and writing for a great organization called Better Man. Wrote a book a number of years ago called Tasty Jesus. You can find that online. All that to say, look at the show notes, and you can get more information on Dr. Bryan. There you have, guys. Be strong. Your best days are yet to be.
Yes, sir. Be strong.